afternoon, class. My name is Natalia, and I'm going to be your teacher for today. Our topic for today is the wages journal, and this is our 5th lesson for grade 8. As usual, please have a pen and a notebook ready to take important notes. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to: Number 1, explain wages and salary. Number 2, distinguish between gross wage and net wage. Number 3, explain the differences between the normal time and overtime. Number 4, describe the following deductions, which are pension fund, medical aid, payee, social security fund, and finally, union subscription. Well, each business needs to pay its employees for the work they've rendered to the business. Employees can be paid on a weekly basis or can be paid a fixed amount per month. Paying employees is also a financial transaction from the business. By now you have learned the accounting concept and terminology, the source documents, the effect of the cash transaction on the accounting equation, as well as the cash book. And today in this lesson, we are going to learn more about the wages journal.
Miss, we have a business in town. Some workers work full-time and others work only occasionally. I think the full-time workers do get a monthly salary, which is every month the same amount. Other workers come sometimes and work only for days or certain hours per day, depending on how much they have to do. Their salary varies, sometimes more and sometimes less. I think they get an amount per hour, and this is why the payout depends on the time they are working. Is this what we call wages?
Wait, hold on. I think wages is when you work and get paid at the end of the week, and salary is when you work and get paid at the end of the month.
Interesting. Thank you, Esther and Celine. That's quite an improvement. Wages is the remuneration workers received when they are paid weekly, while salary is the remuneration workers received when they are paid on a monthly basis.
But what will happen if the worker only works for a day?
If the worker works for a day, then he or she will receive wages.
I also realized that our workers are not receiving the whole amount they are supposed to earn. As at their payslip, the first amount is written gross wages, followed by some deductions, and the last amount is written net wages.
Gross wages is the amount of money paid to workers before taxes, and net wages is what the employees get after their taxes.
Thanks, Celine. That was a good try. When we talk of gross wages, this is a normal time wages plus overtime wages for an employee. Whereas net wages is the wages of an employee after all deductions, which is basically gross wages minus deductions. Esther, do you perhaps know what overtime is?
I think overtime is when an employee works on Sunday, while normal time is when an employee works during the week, which is Monday to Friday. Could that be correct, miss?
Wait, I thought overtime is when an employee works more hours than he or she is expected to work, and normal time is when an employee works with no additional hours.
Thank you, Esther and Celine. You are learning very fast. Normal time is the number of hours an employee should work over a given period of time. For example, 40 hours per week. While overtime is an extra time worked in a given period. For example, if a normal time is 40 hours, an employee worked for 50 hours, that extra 10 hours is considered as overtime. Please note, total hours minus normal hours equals to overtime. In this case will be 50 hours that was worked minus the normal working hours, which is 40 hours, equals to 10 hours extra that the worker have worked. Well, Esther mentioned earlier that there are also some deductions from the employee's wages. This money is deducted from the employee's gross wage by the employers. Normally, deductions are paid to the various bodies on behalf of an employee by the employer on a monthly basis. But sometimes, some of these deductions are compulsory and others are deducted as per employee's request. The total deduction made from the employee's wage can consist of one or more of the followings. Selina, can you perhaps mention a few?
I think pension fund, which is a deduction from the employee's wages to the pension fund scheme so that he or she will get the money when he or she turns 60 years old.
Well done, Celine. Pension fund is a deduction made if the employee belongs to a pension fund scheme in order to provide for his or her old age when she or he is no longer able to work. An example of a pension fund scheme is GIPF. This is not a compulsory deduction in all businesses.
If an employee does not want or cannot afford to pay a pension fund, will he or she be forced to do so?
No, Celine. Since the pension fund deduction is not compulsory, hence an employee cannot be forced into the deduction.
Miss, another deduction is a medical aid, which is when money is deducted from the employee for medical aid to enable an employee and his or her family members to be treated by the private doctors when they get sick.
Yes, Esther. Medical aid is an amount of money deducted from the gross wages of an employee by the employer for medical aid fund. Most employees are members of medical aid fund, which pays for their medical expenses when they or their family members become ill. Medical aid fees are paid according to the numbers of dependents in the family of the employee. The deduction is not compulsory in all businesses. Oh, Celine, can you perhaps explain to me what payee means?
This is the amount of tax paid by an employee to the Ministry of Finance as income tax revenue.
Not bad. PAYE, which stands for Pay As You Earn, is the tax calculated on the employee earnings and paid monthly to the receiver of revenue, which is now the Ministry of Finance. This type of tax is called payee, which is now Pay As You Earn. The more an employee earns, the higher the tax rate charged and the more tax the employee has to pay. This is a compulsory deduction.
So, Miss, will the employee get his or her money back from the pay with the pension fund?
No, Esther. The payee deduction amounts goes to the government, and this is one way how the government generates its revenue. And Esther, how about Social Security Fund?
I think Social Security Fund is a contribution from an employer and employee for social security needs. But Miss, what are social security needs?
Great. As Esther mentioned, Social Security Fund is an amount of money deducted from the gross wage of an employee by the employer for social security needs. For example, the Social Security Fund pays employees for 3 months if they go on maternity leave. Or Social Security Fund will pay a certain amount to people who are unemployed after they have lost their job when it's not their fault. And this is a compulsory deduction for all people who work and receive a basic wage.
This time of COVID-19, a lot of people have lost their jobs. Are they also entitled to get paid by Social Security?
Good question. People who have lost their jobs and they are members of the Social Security are entitled to get a refund as they have lost their job and it was not their fault. Esther, how about the union subscription? Can you explain on that one?
Miss, I'm not so sure, but I think union subscriptions refers to the unions who represent employees when they have difficulties at their workplace.
Well, Esther, when an employee belongs to a certain union, there is a union subscription fee that needs to pay. Therefore, a union subscription fee is an amount of money deducted on gross wage of an employee by the employer for the membership of an employee union. Therefore, members of the trade union pays a monthly subscription fee in order for them to belong to their union of their choice. For example, in Namibia, we have a union called NANTU that represents the teachers, and the deduction is not compulsory. Celine, Can you please elaborate more on the employer's contribution?
I think this is when an employer contributes to the pension fund of an employee.
Well said and well done. Some employers also contribute to the pension fund and to the medical aid fund of an employee. This means that the employee does not have to pay the full amount to this fund. Well, thank you very much, class. We have come to the end of our lesson presentation, but before we go, let us summarize what we have learned in today's lesson.
Okay, Miss, I will give it a try. During today's lesson, I've learned about the wages journal, and I'm able to differentiate between wages and salary. I can also distinguish between gross wages and net wages. Further, I can also explain the difference between normal time and overtime.
I also learned the different types of deduction made from an employer's wages, which are pension fund, medical aid, pay as in pay as you earn, social security, union subscription, and employer's contribution.
Well, thank you for answering the question. But before we say goodbye, there is a small quiz for you today. Question 1. Define the term wages. Question 2. Distinguish between gross wage and net wages. And lastly, question 3. Mention 5 different types of deduction that can be made from the worker's wages. This lesson was written by Vicky Nangobe. Until next time, goodbye.
This program was brought to you by NAMCOL with funding from the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture and the Commonwealth of Learning.